This episode of Ladder Legacy is proudly sponsored by the Bedford Group Insurance, helping families and businesses protect what matters most. Whether it's coverage for your home, your family, your team, or your future, Bedford's got your back with the best reliable insurance solutions in Florida. Visit our website to learn more, bedfordinsurance.com. And now on to your episode.
Hey everybody, this is Rudy Romero with From Ladder to Legacy. I have the pleasure today of introducing Alexa Evans, the founder of Untrendy Marketing, located here in the Palm Beaches, who is doing more things that I can only imagine in the marketing space. And I'm so excited to be able to have her sit down with me today and talk more about all the work she's up to. Alexa, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, it's definitely a pleasure. It's been a while since I saw you, but I think that you have done some awesome and amazing things since I think it's been almost a year now at this point.
Yeah.
I'd love to know about Untrendy Marketing, all the struggles, the trials, the tribulations, all the fun stuff you've been up to. But let's make it super easy. What is Untrendy Marketing?
So Untrendy Marketing is a full service marketing agency. We work primarily with professional service providers and then nonprofits, especially in like the arts sector and human services sector.
Awesome. And what have you found more excitement doing? Is it the arts? Is it the nonprofit sector? What has been more fun?
Well, I grew up in the art world. So I was a dancer as a kid, got a theater degree in college. So it's always fun to keep a toe in that world. One of our customers is a theater based in Sarasota. So we get to, enjoy what bringing a show to life looks like, not as necessarily as a performer, but from the back end of things and help creatively tell the story to the public so that we can get butts and seats.
That's really interesting. So what's your approach at Untrendy Marketing to marketing? Is it everyone talks about SEO, SEM this, but I think you guys do things a little bit differently there, right?
We do. We try to take a pretty holistic approach. So we find that the customers who have the best success working with us allow us to take on the entire marketing function. So we make sure that everything from their socials, their newsletters, their website, even swag and how they show up in the community is all really cohesive. When you are pulling somebody off of Fiverr to do one gig and then somebody else off of a different platform, your product can become a little disjointed and so can your brand. So we really like to help our customers achieve that polished end-to-end appearance so that if somebody's interacting with them, no matter where they are, they look the same. So to that end, we don't really chase trends. Trends are helpful to market your business, but they shouldn't be your entire strategy, right? So our shtick
You
is
guys aren't running around yelling 6-7?
No.
Okay.
Unless
Good.
it's
I was
5,
going to
6,
say.
7.
Oh, well, there you go. Or five, yeah, that's the what, five was it 6, 8, 7, or 7, 8, 9 or something like that. I was joking with my kids.
Yeah. So we're not big trend chasers. And most of our customers have been in business 10 or more years, right? So they don't need their business to be trendy or to be a flash in the pan, right? They've built their lives around owning their own company and having the agency of running a company themselves. And so our support comes in and really allows them to continue doing that. And then, when they have the opportunity to take on a new initiative or offer a new service, they've already got a marketing function that's up and running, and we can just take that to the next level with them as their business continues to grow.
Now, what inspired you to get into this? Because, obviously you just talked about dancing and you had a whole different background. What was your inspiration for obviously founding?
Well, I always knew that performing would be hard. It would be inconsistent, right? And so the practical side of me first got into technical theater, which doesn't seem like it has a lot to do with marketing for small businesses, but come along for the ride for a second here. So I learned how to be a stage manager in college and really got the behind the scenes picture of what it takes to put a show on. So everything from costumes to lighting to sound and the actors on stage, everything has to be cohesive and come together, right? And so we take that same approach from the theater and the performing arts world, and we try to apply it to the businesses that we work with. Everything from the color psychology of your brand to the way you're communicating and writing, we look at it like, what do all of these things together say? And so that's kind of our approach.
That makes sense. And I think that's, like you said, the holistic approach, right? You're looking at it from a very different standpoint than other people more than likely have in your industry. And I think that comes back to your intriguing name. How did you land on it? What does untrendy mean in the marketing context anyway?
Yeah, to be trendy is to be like on the current and the trend comes and goes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I've always thought about fashion versus style, right? And the difference between two, and style kind of stays the same, but fashions change. And so it's kind of the same with trendy versus untrendy, right? Like I think the closest synonym that we would say exists to the phrase untrendy is timeless. You know, it's something that you can come back to over and over again and go, that did look good. That still looks good. So that's the approach we try to have. You know, I founded the LLC really before I knew I wanted to take it in a marketing direction. And so I was working, 2020, I had a salaried position at a large regional theater, and we stayed on until June 2020. So the end of their fiscal year, the entire staff was able to stay on board, which was really a testament to what I and my fundraising team had been able to do while I was on that team. And so when the furlough came, I was like kind of biding my time, knew I had the opportunity to go back to that position and wasn't really aggressively trying to go out and pursue, a promotion or another larger job at a different organization or something like that. And so, kind of slowly but surely, we inherited a couple customers from somebody who was going to get a job. They were all in the accounting sector. I have a family full of accountants, so I've learned a lot about that industry through osmosis over my teen years and beyond. So yeah, we inherited a couple customers, and then from there just kind of sustainably continued to grow the business. And by the time I was given an offer to go back to that role, about a year had passed and the business was doing well enough on its own that I actually declined that offer, bet on myself. So
Good for you. And I think that's what it takes, right? To move from that ladder to the legacy that I've been talking about all this time. And I love how you use the word timeless, because it brings me to my next question. At what point did you realize there was a need for timeless marketing for the small business to stay in power?
I think I kind of always knew it. I was never a trendy kid, in the aughts when all of my peers were dressing in Hollister and Abercrombie, and like that was what you were wearing to school at the time. I wasn't that kid. And so I was always kind of carving my own path and trying not to just follow what everybody else was doing and think about whether or not it was something that really aligned with what I wanted, what I wanted to wear, what I wanted to put out there. And so that, even if I didn't have that language at the time, it was always a priority of mine. So by the time this business came to be and I started marketing for other businesses, I wasn't trying to shoehorn anybody into a new trend or, an Instagram post every single day. That doesn't support all businesses' sales goals, or what their priorities are in trying to capture new leads.
Yeah. And obviously you've had experience in luxury sales, I believe, in fundraising, right? So how does that influence your approach to marketing? Because that obviously is a huge, great opportunity for others to be able to lean on you because you have that experience. And how has it served you so far?
Yeah. The fundraising aspect has served us well in that, it's kind of the same thing as producing a show at a theater, right? Producing a gala it's not that different. You have many of the same components and everything has to come together for this one ephemeral experience that's not going to last, longer than a couple hours. And so being able to tell a story in that capacity in a really immersive way, gave me a really good foundation to say, okay, we can't accomplish this in person for every small business, right? So much of your marketing happens digitally. So how do we take that and apply it to other businesses in that case? And so the fundraising aspect has worked really well for storytelling for small businesses, right? In fundraising, you have to get people to be willing to give you money because it makes them feel good, right? They're not buying something out of that arrangement, right?
Very emotional. Yeah.
Yeah, very emotional. And so taking some of that and bringing it into the for-profit world, right? And okay, what were the stories that were successful? How did we tell them? How did that work? And how can we take what we've learned and bring it into the small business sector? And then the luxury side of things, when I was in my college years, I worked in retail for luxury cosmetics brands. And so it was really cool to be able to see, as a salesperson or as a brand representative in those positions, to see what materials I was provided with in order to sell, right? What stories was I provided about the brand? What are the products? What makes them different from everything else? And so from a really young age, I was exposed to how a brand lays out the information it needs to get another person to sell it for them. And so again, that just translates into the marketing that we do now.
Of course, that makes perfect sense. And again, I think that's just part of what helps you guys set yourselves apart from the others. But like all true founders and all businesses, obviously you face challenges early on when building the business. How did you overcome them? Because again, they can be challenging.
Yeah. Listen, starting a business in the throes of a pandemic is
It's easy, right?
probably as like inconsistent or unstable or unpredictable as, a time you could possibly find to start a business. So it was a little bit out of necessity, right? But how do I want to say this? At the same time, even though it was a really uncertain time period to be doing this, I knew all I had to do was hang on by my fingernails until we got past this point, right? We hear these statistics about companies that go out of business, the majority of them before 5 years, and then, even a higher percentage after 10. And so it's kind of inevitable that a business comes to an end, almost, it seems like, from a statistical point of view. But from growing up in the performing arts, I kind of learned that, you're betting on yourself as an actor or a dancer when you go into an audition. And you don't necessarily have to be the best one. You just have to hold on longer than everybody else, right? You have to hold your own in that audition longer than everybody else. And I watched a lot of people growing up who existed in the performing arts space with me, who then, went and got, non-performing positions sooner than I did. And I never considered myself the best person in the room. And then all of a sudden I was just the last one in the room. So I knew from that experience that if I held on by my fingernails, eventually I would be the last one there, and the competition would kind of fade away, and I'd, have a clear running path. So I've always just kind of applied that to whatever's in front of me.
I think that's a great approach. It's the same thing if you're getting chased by a bear. You don't have to be the fastest person, just don't be the slowest, right? I mean, that's again, I think that's a very interesting mentality, but I apply the same thing, right? And that's, it's almost the same thing in corporations, right? You end up in a situation where you don't necessarily increase up the ladder because your performance, maybe it's great, but also people can't take the heat, so they have to get out of the kitchen, right? So, or in this space, the stage, right? They can't take the stage lights, so they leave. And it gives you the opportunity to kind of move forward. Yeah. So I guess walk us through, like, in practice, your first client. Do you have a good first client story? Because I'm sure you do, and I can imagine it's probably a fun one.
We have a first 3 clients, so we got all 3 at the same time. Yeah, the accounting bubble and the QuickBooks ecosystem bubble is small. Everybody kind of knows each other. They refer resources back and forth. And so, I inherited my first 3 customers kind of through the relationship that I had built because my mother is an accountant and has been practicing in the Palm Beaches for about, 15, 16 years now. And so, we inherited a book of a couple customers in the accounting sector who all knew each other from somebody who had been freelancing and doing their marketing. She went and pursued a job at a different company and wanted somebody who could take care of her customers. And we had worked together collaborating on one of those customers already together. And so she thought that I was the right fit to take on these relationships and continue managing those services. So that was in December of 2020. We still have all of those 3 customers to this day, and of course then some. Wow. So, that was exciting. I didn't really know what was going to happen in 2020. All I knew was that this was an opportunity that I knew I could do. And so I took it and I ran with it.
Wow. No, that's great. And it's amazing you still have them now. I mean, obviously things come and change, but it's always nice to have the first few clients that started with you. I have the same thing for a couple of the businesses I run. Those first few who come in and, kind of see where you came from to where you've been, appreciate you because you've, kept them and done right by them, even though you've kind of grown and, grown into yourself and the business has grown to itself.
Yeah.
So I know a couple of things I had read a little bit about the company was that the Ask Us Anything model is interesting. So do you have maybe a little you can share a story or a brief information on how that kind of shifted for your business and how that helped your business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We work with a lot of people who work with other small businesses. So, every now and then we would get a request, hey, I've got this idea I'm just starting to work on. And when we chatted with these people, we kind of realized that they weren't necessarily ready to fully outsource their marketing function, right? They're kind of at, I would say, the entry point of becoming an entrepreneur. They've got an idea, it's usually pretty good, and they need some help figuring out how to get it out there, how to differentiate it. And so we set up this Ask Us Anything call model so that people who, have a question, have access to an expert. You can type something into ChatGPT and ask it, but you're not always going to get an answer that is actually valuable or is specific to what your pain points are, right? So, we set up this consult call service, essentially is what it is, right? And you can come in and we can, do anything from create a whole strategy within an hour or 2 for a product or a service, but we can also just connect you with the resources that we know are out there that we think are the best fit for your needs. That's probably some of the hardest work that somebody just getting started who doesn't know a single thing about marketing, they don't know what email provider to use. They don't know where they need to prioritize, should they build a website or a social media presence or a newsletter first, and those things don't always need to happen all at once. And so we help them, find the resources that are best fit for their need and budget, provide some feedback about what we've seen work really well, and then ask the right questions that help them figure out what they do or don't know about their product so that they can go and refine that a little bit further.
Awesome. And that I can see makes sense 100%. Because like you said, ChatGPT is only as good as what you're inputting anyway. So it takes a human being to kind of read between the lines. And that's a conversation I had with another podcast person who'd come on. And we talked about, just because AI is out there. And again, I love Bot Queen. I love all of the AI stuff that's going out there, our mutual friend. And I just know AI is only as good as what you give it, right? And with AI automation and rapid content cycles, how do you see that evolving in the human storytelling evolution happening? Because again, there's going to be some fighting in between content creators wanting to use AI more. Some of them are just want to be copywriters and do that type of work because they just enjoy writing. What have you guys seen on trends wise with AI, since everybody always wants to talk about AI, of course?
Yeah, it's true. It's a big topic right now, as it should be, right? We look at AI as a tool, and we know AI can't write as good as we can, and we know it can't design as good as we can. AI is so helpful for getting something out there, and in a lot of ways it really democratizes creating content because it eliminates a lot of barriers that somebody who hasn't been doing this forever, right, and has an idea and wants to get started, it democratizes that process and it lets them get a toehold and start putting things out there. But from our experience, AI can really lends itself to a really homogenous voice. And so I'm sure you started noticing it with some of the social media stuff that you're consuming and even maybe email marketing from other businesses. If you're not using AI with guardrails around what your brand is and how you want to speak and what the motifs you like to use are, right? Like Palm Beach Accounting, for example, they use a lot of sailing and sea motifs because they're Palm Beach adjacent. We can sprinkle that into their language, but AI isn't going to know that unless we tell it. So unless you really have these guardrails in place or these definitions about how you want to use it to tell your story, you're going to come back with something that sounds very similar to a completely different brand. We're seeing it in sentence structure already happening. It's not this dash, it's that. We see that so much now in social.
Dash.
It worked. I love me an M dash, don't get me wrong. But if you use it 9 times in a single blog post, even if it's your writing style now, somebody's going to think you used AI, right? So, we look at punctuation like it's a salad. You need a little bit of everything to make it sound good. We try really hard to create content that looks like a human wrote it and doesn't sound like the exact same thing that you're reading from every other brand out there that, doesn't have these parameters in place.
Yeah. And like you said, it's inputs, right? It's just another form of data creation. So inputs are only good as outputs. And again, I get it. And I've spent a ton of money on different AI platforms and try to see what would work, whether it be from sales, from a service standpoint, from a marketing standpoint. I've tried them all. And again, they're just tools. They are not going to replace humans today, maybe not even for 5 to 10 years for most situations, because they just don't have, again, us humans have to also kind of catch up to the AI revolution, right? Because we're only as smart as what we input. So at the end of the day, inputs and outputs, it doesn't really matter if you don't know what you're going to actually ask it or aren't as specified like you had said. And that's hilarious that you say it that way, because I feel like a lot of people today are really just trying to harp on it and think that it's this magical beast of a machine that just does whatever you want. And there's some good input. Again, there's some good options to be able to use it. Creating images, doing little things quickly, totally get it. But I just don't see it replacing somebody on Canva building something that takes 3 hours, because that is just humanly done. They take their time. They look for details. They don't misspell words or put Latin in there or put dashes. So these are things that people don't notice until they get it posted. And then they're looking at it like, what in the heck did we do? Yeah. That wasn't supposed to be in there, right?
Yeah.
So what marketing trends do you believe are overrated, right?
Well, that is a good question.
We talked about the joke. We joked about 6-7 a little bit, but I hope nobody's actually doing it. I don't think anyone's actually doing it, but no, I'm sure there are a few out there that are a little weird though, that aren't really.
It's all kids, right? Like that's something that's really existing primarily in like the high school and younger, age groups. We work with interns from my alma mater, Eckerd College, over in St. Pete. So we're working with people in their early 20s and in their mid 20s, and the good news is that everybody can still communicate outside of like the lingo that we see filling up the internet, right? That like internet brain rot that we hear so much about. I think as far as trends go, one thing that I have seen that I think is really helpful for businesses is automation using ManyChat. So that's an automatic system that will send somebody, you might have seen like an Instagram post that says, comment the word article and I'll send you the link to this blog post. And so that makes it so that anybody commenting on a post automatically gets a DM with the link to click it, right? And so that reduces some of the friction that we see in social media, especially on Instagram, that doesn't have clickable hyperlink opportunities in its captions. Sending somebody to your profile, telling them to pick out the right link out of 5, having them load the page, it's so much easier to just have this automation in place. So we've seen some success with that. Outside of that, what we've seen a lot of success with Trendwise as well is making sure that our businesses have solid email marketing set up. A lot of times
have you seen a
people
lot of
might have
success with that?
I have, yeah. Newsletter is definitely not dead, and compared to social media marketing, you own your mailing list, right? Your social media platform could evaporate, at any point. Quite frankly, your account could get hacked.
Yep.
The provider could cease to exist at some point. So you don't own those people, and if you can't access that platform for whatever reason, you can't market your business if that's your only channel. You need another way to get in touch with your people. And statistically, the people who have provided their information to you to be contacted by you through email are more likely to buy anyway than somebody who's just following you on social media. So, by giving people that opportunity to, opt in and share that they're interested in learning more about you, you already have more qualified leads on your mailing list than you do on your social media.
Now, an unpopular opinion that I believe, but it may not be, I'm not sure, is SEM, is that digital marketing, getting out there and advertising, right? Paying for advertisements. Have you seen a shift, especially with Facebook? A lot of people used to say, hey, go on Meta, go on there. You're getting a lot of opportunities, right? A lot of hits. And, even personally for the businesses I've seen a decline in the ability to find qualified candidates by spending money on ads and such on Facebook. But then on the other hand, Google has done a better job for me with a lot of things as well, being able to get that marketing out there. Are you seeing anything better? Is there better systems out there or better opportunities to market or paid marketing than what the normal Facebook and Google has provided most, we'll call it, business owners in the past?
Yeah. Something especially for businesses that work, in the community that they're based in and are very well entrenched in that, right? You can be a digital company and be working all over the country. We do that, right? But we're very entrenched in the Palm Beach community. One thing that I think a lot of small businesses might discount is the opportunity to gain exposure through sponsorships and sponsorship opportunities with nonprofits. So if you can find a nonprofit that the work that they do aligns with either something that you care very deeply about, or that aligns very closely with the work that you do as a service provider, that helps tell your story, right? Like, yes, it's logo exposure. It's the opportunity to have your brand published on somebody else's website with a click link back, which is really helpful. It's an opportunity to get a shout out in social media or a newsletter or something like that. But even more than that, it helps you tell your brand story a little bit further because you're just telling the community, hey, this is something that I care about that is important to my business and my brand. And by continuing to show up that way over and over again, either with the same organization and then, maybe adding another one into the mix, you're not only obviously doing something great by supporting an organization that you care about, you're also getting the brand recognition and, quite frankly, the advertising benefits that come with that. I think for a lot of small businesses that need to scale very sustainably and can't take on a ton of clients all at once, that's a really great way to get your name out in the community.
Awesome. And I can't agree more, especially you're being able to help these wonderful nonprofits, especially in the Palm Beaches here. There's so many of them that do give a lot back to their people, right? Not just executives taking paychecks. It's actually helping, between Barky Pines and Grandma's Place and all the other wonderful places that are here in the Palm Beaches, Excel, Pathway to College. There's so many great nonprofits here in the Palm Beaches. I definitely agree with that wholeheartedly. I've seen great opportunity to partner with them in so many different ways to be able to help them. But your company's won a creative award or two, right? For content creation. Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about that, because I know you guys were close on one before, but you also won a few. Again, and this is, all these things, you never know what you're going to find, right? Awards are like awards. You never know what you're going to get. And you're working the whole country. Obviously, you said you're focused on Palm Beaches, but tell me more about some of the awards you may have won.
Yeah, so we are 6-time nominees for the Reelies Awards, and we won an award in 2024 for a reel that we produced. 6 submissions is really great, right? To be a finalist 6 times is amazing.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Amazing.
So it's that particular competition award show opportunity is primarily for small creators and entrepreneurs, the people who are really running a small business people, right? And not necessarily, the influencers that you see all over the internet and their 1.5 million followers. This isn't the opportunity for them. It's for the people out there trying to promote their own business and be creative while they're doing it. And so, yeah, so we submitted a couple of our works in 2024, and we were nominated twice for one category. And in both of the years, 2024 and 2025 we were nominated 4 times, which was amazing. But both years we were really the underdogs. We had produced really good content. I was very proud of our submissions and thought that they stood up very well next to their competition. But then they open it up to public voting, and you don't really know, is somebody with $100,000 followers, 200,000 followers, in the same category as you, are you going to get swept out because they have more numbers than you? So we won our first year, in a category that had, people with thousands upon thousands of followers. And while we're great at marketing, we're not throwing all of our resources towards Instagram. So our follower account is still in, three digits. So, to that end, we really punch above our weight, right? You might look at our account and say, oh, they only have a couple hundred followers. They're not significant.
Yeah.
But the content that we're producing stands up against, people with way more resources than, we have in terms of voters. So it's been exciting. And it's such a great group of people, too, that go. It's in Atlanta every year. It takes place in September. The weather is amazing. It's a highlight every year, So I'm looking forward to creating new work and submitting it for 2026.
Yeah, and again, I think there's a huge misconception because everyone thinks everybody's Instagram and Facebook has to have 10 million followers for them to, oh my gosh, there isn't thousands of followers, then your business isn't good. That is exactly me personally, exactly the opposite mentality. Just because you have a lot of followers doesn't mean you actually have business driving, right? And there's a lot of bots out there, as I like to call it, and maybe that's the wrong term, but bots that just, you can get to physically follow you. So these big companies that have 10, 20 million subscribers or people who are following them doesn't necessarily mean that's actually happening. So I think again, to me, it's an unfair way to see it. I always like fair reviews, right? Reviews are great ways to be able to showcase a business, especially on Google, to give you authenticity, for people to see you. But is there anything else from like a local SEO standpoint that people could be doing to kind of help them stand out? Because like you said, a lot of these people, especially people watching this, are going to be small business owners, right? We'll call it under $2 million a year, maybe 2.5 a year in revenue. What are ways they can kind of, like you said, punch above their weight class a little bit to kind of get ahead?
The same idea about social media that, having a million followers, or hundreds of thousands of followers doesn't necessarily make you the most qualified person. If you were to start on socials right now, you would be hard pressed to gain the visibility that you could, 10 years ago, even 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh yeah.
It's hard to squeeze into all of the noise that already exists there, right? So that's not, to that end, social media isn't always the best opportunity or the best place to invest all of your resources from a marketing perspective, right? And so looking for the same things that exist out in the real world, I think are really important. What are the new opportunities that you can get in on early before somebody else can, that'll give you a little bit more of a competitive edge? I think that those are really valuable.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Again, trying to be different than everybody else, right? Being untrendy is trendy in so many ways.
Yeah.
So you had talked about some past lives that you lived before Untrendy Marketing, but let's take it all the way back to the beginning. I'm gonna switch gears here. We're gonna jam the handbrake here and make a turn.
Okay.
So, in high school, is this what you thought you'd be doing? What was the dream?
I don't think so. If you had told me that I was going to end up being the boss of myself, I probably would have been like, yeah, that checks out. Like, that makes sense to me. I was always, I grew up in a dancer. I was in dance class every weeknight for the most part for my entire, up until high school. Right? So,
Now,
so that was the world that I...
What type of dancing were you doing? Just so we're all...
It was mostly ballet. It was mostly ballet. I did a little tap. I did a little modern. Jazz and I did not get on very well.
No jazz hands?
I was a little ballerina, right? Like jazz was just like, I don't know, the two didn't translate for me. So, high school, I didn't really work in high school. I, pursued performing stuff at the time. After high school is really when I, kind of got into the cosmetics branding side of things. So I had a summer job at a local business that isn't in operation anymore, but they were a marketing company that worked with these cosmetic brands that, would then go into Nordstrom and Neiman's and Ulta Beauty and things like that. So, I got office experience there. And then from that, moved into a brand rep. So I was traveling in college to, the shops that were in my jurisdiction essentially during the holiday season. So when people are really trying to corner the buyers, right? And like convince people to try their products when people are looking to spend those dollars anyway and are looking at beauty products. I was in Nordstrom's, I was in Ulta, I was either in South Florida or I was on the West Coast from Naples up to Tampa. And so, that experience, sales is hard, but selling to complete strangers who are walking right by you is like even harder. So it really, it allowed me to get that courage at an early age of talking to people and doing business. And, I always believed in the products that I was representing. I always thought they were valuable and that people should spend their money on them. So to that extent, it was easy to be a salesperson because I knew it was something that they should buy. I didn't have to, pretend like I was behind something that I wasn't. From those sales roles, I moved into the back end of theater. So I had studied stage management in college because I knew I wanted to spend time in that industry, even if I couldn't do it on stage. And so I was an assistant stage manager in college and then actually landed a role as a stage manager with a theater right after college, essentially within a couple months, which is kind of unheard of for a 22-year-old.
Yeah.
And that was, interestingly, to circle back to my last point before we got into this item is, that was an opportunity that was brand new to the market. So, they were looking for somebody that they could afford who was the right fit for their organization. And, would I have been able to become a stage manager at a much larger organization? Probably not at that age. So I took that opportunity, ran with it a little bit, and then got picked up by the Maltz Jupiter Theater. I had been a dancer growing up. I had taken dance classes there. And so their director of education at the time, Julie Rowe, was like, we need to get you out of sales and we need to get you back into the theater. And so, she connected me with the fundraising department. They were looking to fill a role at that time. And so that was the last big position that I had until the pandemic happened, was with that organization. So yeah, and then I went out on my own and here we are.
That's amazing. And when did you think, obviously COVID kind of pushed all of us to figure out what we wanted to do, but like when did that switch flip for you that you knew that you were going to go this direction? Because I know you said you had opened up Untrendy Marketing, you didn't know exactly what you were going to do with it, but then something flipped for you, right? There was that aha moment. When was that aha moment and what'd you do about it?
I think the aha moment initially for me was that I knew that there were accounting companies that had founders who had absolutely no interest in doing the marketing themselves, right? They're numbers people. Accountants might be creative in many ways, but they've got bigger fish to fry than coming up with a social media post. I knew enough about the accounting industry from having grown up in my mother's firm that I knew what the things were that would differentiate them from other companies, and I knew how to tell their story, and I knew how to talk about their topics in a way that not many people do. There are not a lot of creatives out there who have an accounting knowledge, and can talk about that industry intelligently and create long-form content that actually holds up. So yeah, that was really the first opportunity that we saw and seized on.
And since then, obviously, you've gone through the trials, the tribulations, COVID, all the fun stuff that's happened. But outside of, we'll call it, the stuff you couldn't necessarily control, working in the Palm Beaches, I'm sure has been exciting. It's been fun. But what are some challenges as a business owner in the Palm Beaches that you've had that kind of you wish that could be fixed? If you had the magic wand and could say, hey, tomorrow I wish this would change, what are some of those things that you think could help change if, somebody of importance was watching this and said, hey, we wanted to fix something?
That's a good question. I will say that I think the thing that I like the most about the business community in Palm Beach County is that everybody is really excited to connect with each other. Everybody has this optimism, I think, to business, where there's always an opportunity to be had or a connection to be made. And so you walk into a room at, a networking event, if it's hosted by a chamber or anybody else, and it's easy to make new acquaintances and make new friends, right? So I love that part about it. I don't really know if I have anything that I feel like is a big pain point that I wish could really be resolved.
Which is a good thing. It goes to a testament of how good Florida and the Palm Beaches has been for business owners to come here. You have the Titus Center for Franchising here for a reason, right? So there's a lot of great organizations down here doing franchise work, small business ownership works. Again, other than taxes, which who loves that, right? Which is still not too terrible down here, but who can really complain? But with your growth, how have you used like a balanced approach to keeping and maintaining the quality of work aligning with what your offerings are? Because I know, like you said, you had 3 clients, and I'm sure 3 went to 6, 6 went to 12, 12 to 24, and it just compounded, exponentially, which is wonderful. But, what have you done to keep yourself balanced as well as maintaining the quality for your clients?
Yeah. So we always look for ways that we can do the work that we're doing, faster without sacrificing quality, right? Everybody looks for those golden opportunities. Outside of that, I've always been very mindful of, is something sustainable to do? Is this something that I can do long term? Or is this, a project that I can grind out for a month or two? And really making sure that the work that we're fitting into our firm's book, quite frankly, fits our ability to deliver it, and, also our greatest expertise. We don't really work with product-based businesses because the stakes are much higher in that sector than it is for a service provider. With a service provider, we can, slowly start to build up what their brand looks like and kind of compound the value over time. And there's a much greater sense of urgency when you're working with inventory. So, I think I lost my train of thought.
I think that that's okay because it's a lot of information, but I think that's a fair answer. And again, I think you are trying to do, again, like anybody else, the most with the best, with the least amount of money, the best opportunity for everybody. Again, it's like every other business owner here, trying to do the right thing by your client, but also being able to pay your team, right? And let's be real. Since COVID, hiring and finding employees has been a little bit harder. And I'm not sure if that's something you've been dealing with as well, as a struggle to find people to help you be successful. But is that something you've seen over the last few years as the struggle is to find good, competent employees who want to help you grow, be successful, but also help?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and I think for our company in particular, I have found luck by going back to the place that, made me, right? So I went back to my alma mater and looked for talent there. And I've done that multiple times. Pretty much anybody who's worked for us on a long-term basis has come from Eckerd College in one shape or form. That was important to me because as a school that offered a liberal arts degree, I knew that, I came out multidisciplinary, right? I'm a solid writer, I'm a solid designer, I have a good eye for these kinds of things. And so I knew that a place that had this approach that wasn't hyper-focused on, one thing like graphic design or written communication, but gave somebody a really good holistic education would create, the generalists that I needed initially, right? We have specialist roles now in the firm. We have some really qualified graphic designers and copy editors that we work with. But, the foundation, the core of the people that work with us the most are good generalists. They can make a good design and they can write good text. Finding that has been hard. And going to a place that I knew created thinkers like that has been the only reason I think that we have been as successful as we are.
No, I agree with that 100%. I couldn't see it any other way. And I believe it. It's in the quality of work I've seen you already produce and the people that I've spoken to who obviously know the quality of work you put out there. And again, poaching or grabbing from your old alma mater, I'm sure they truly appreciate that because, it's so hard out there right now for, just same as it is for employers. It's hard for employees as well to find good opportunities out there in the world that are willing to pay fair wages because things are not inexpensive in Florida. This isn't the place it was 10 years ago. Unfortunately, rent is expensive, especially in the West Palm area, unless you go up further north. But if you go up further north, you lose this beautiful weather we have. So, why would you do that?
Yeah.
What's a marketing myth you wish everyone would stop believing?
That is a good question. That more content is better. I think we all have, we've all been exposed to this idea that we need to be putting more out there and we need to be competing and just get it out, just ship it. And I think that, while that can be a good mentality to have at times, especially if you're in the midst of a sales campaign, right? Somebody has to see something so many more times than they used to before they decide to make a sale or a purchase. But if that's your entire approach to marketing, I am of the mindset that we're just creating more noise if we're doing that. And then we're making it harder for everybody in the process. So, if you look over at our little social media presence, you'll see that we post something maybe about once a week. And that's really what sustains us. We don't get a ton of business through Instagram. So we show up there as a way to showcase the work that we can do. And stay in touch with the people who want to follow us there. But we receive most of our business through word of mouth referrals, as a lot of other small businesses do. And so for those leads that we receive, the social media, the web presence, everything like that is just part of the vetting, right? It's one of the things that you do after you get a referral, right? You go see if this company's legit, if they look trustworthy, if they look like they're going to solve your problem. And so if you've already been exposed to them, you're really just looking for a little, confirmation that what you think is the case is already true. So yeah, more content isn't always better content. That's the myth that I want to smash.
And that's outstanding, because that's what all I hear from marketing people is that you need to send more, push more, do more. And it's interesting you're saying it that way, because that is definitely something that even people that I work with now are saying, no, we should definitely push out more content. The more the merrier, because it gets you relevant, gets you more likes, more comments, more ways to push you up in the rankings. So that is a very interesting counter argument. And hey, again, you know better than I do, so it makes sense to me.
Yeah,
If you weren't
you know,
if you weren't in marketing and somebody just decided to say, hey, we're going to buy Untrendy Marketing for whatever, a zillion bucks, right? What would you then do? What's your, if you had the magic wand, what would you pursue? Would it still be marketing, or would you go into dancing again?
I think I would still be involved in helping businesses in some way. I would love to have, all 10 toes in a dance studio a bit more often. So, with a little spare time, I'm sure there would be more of that. But, I know that nonprofits and small businesses in particular are really the backbone of our economy, right? So, I think it's worthwhile to continue investing in the people who have a product that's been proven, right? They've got a service or a nonprofit or something. They've been in business for, 10 or more years. They know what they're doing. They're helping the right people and continuing to help in the best way that we can with the knowledge that we have. It would be a shame to walk away from this and let my knowledge die with me, right? And not use it as an opportunity to help other people. I feel like as entrepreneurs, we all started our business because we wanted to help other people run better businesses and live better lives. That's something that we all have in common if we're running our own company. So that's something
Yeah,
I try to
most
carry with
definitely.
me today.
And it's amazing. That's a good mentality to have, right? It's not about the dollar. It's about helping others be more successful. And through that, a lot of people call it the giving mentality, right? Is giving back and helping other business owners, that how much that comes back to you. And it's great to see that you and the company have that same vision, for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite piece of content you've created? Because I've imagined you've done some interesting things. But what's the thing, if somebody said, hey, we want to, give you an award for something, what's that piece of content that you really hoped they would look at and say, hey, that's the thing. You had a good time with it. That's it.
One of the pieces of content that we created, I mean, it has won an award. It won a really. So it's nice that it did get that recognition. But if you've been around the gram for the past couple years, every now and then around Halloween, you see this reel of two ghosts in high heels running across the street in Worth Avenue. And we created that, right? We took a ghost trend that already did exist out there in the real world. And we were like, what would be really funny is if we were like little ghosts shopping. And so we did it. We put it out there. It's been picked up a couple times by other accounts. And, it's fun to see that recognition and to see that video still has some life to it a couple years later. Outside of that, I mean, I think we have a really beautiful website. I would love to get an award for how pretty our website is, how well designed it is. So if Squarespace wants to reach out and hand me one of those awards, I would gladly take it.
Squarespace, did you hear that? That's hilarious. It is a nice website. To be fair, guys, and we'll make sure obviously we link that back also so people can see it. Books and resources, like what has been the most influential thing, or thing that gave you the approach to market and leadership? Because obviously there's 100 ways people look at this. Leaders are born, leaders are created. I have no dog in the race either way. But has there anything resource-wise or book-wise that's really provided you with what you think you've needed to be successful?
I mean, I love Brene Brown's works. And out of like a leadership perspective, one of the things that has been super valuable, I think, in how we tailor our communication for our customers is a book called Smart Brevity. It was written by the team at Axios and Politico because people kept reaching out to them about the way that they were structuring their newsletters and their written communication and how digestible it was. And so that was a really, brief read. It wasn't a very long book, but it really packed a lot of value and changed the way that we communicate, on behalf of our customers. We try to do it with as little verbosity as possible, right? And to be concise and get to the point and give people the value that they really want. They had a statement that they made in that book that really stuck with me, from the theater background, and I've also been a theater educator. And so, I've always kind of taken an approach of like, well, assume that the person coming in doesn't know anything, right? What do they need to know to be able to understand this? Which is valuable. But the flip side of that coin is assume that the person reading your material is already very well informed and is an expert and talk to them like that. And so we have taken that approach with the content that we create, because there are, blog posts and articles out there that exist that, a good example, I think, is, anytime you're looking for a recipe and you stumble across a food blog and there's a whole lengthy story beforehand and you just want to get straight to the recipe, you want to get straight to the meat, right? There's so many other forms of content that are out there that have a really long and very verbose introduction that you're like, I came here for a reason, I wanted to find out more, and I'm getting a runaround to begin with. And to just get to the point and assume that your people know what they're reading about has changed the way that we communicate on behalf of our customers.
That's awesome. And that's great that, again, you guys are staying up to date with marketing. You're staying up to date with yourselves, building professional leadership opportunities for yourselves. Again, this is all what it's about. It takes forever. It takes time, right? But the resources we used help really define the business and help the teams out, especially in today's world, right? Where we're all just connected 24/7, 365. There's no disconnect. So having that opportunity is great. Are you a coffee person or a tea person?
I am both. I'm a coffee in the morning and a tea in the afternoon person.
Okay, fair enough. Again, just a couple silly questions I thought I'd ask. Drip coffee or espresso? Any specifics or?
I don't discriminate against coffee, with the exception probably of a Keurig. I love me a diner coffee, a black diner coffee. I love a frappuccino. I love a very nice espresso on a little piazza in Rome. I'll take coffee in any form as long as it's good and drank the way it's supposed to.
Fair enough. I like that. That's a good one. So there's one question I always like to ask people before we kind of work on wrapping it up. Not hard hitting, again, super easy. I always say the same thing and everyone looks at me sideways because like, of course that was a hard question. I'm like, no, it's not, I promise. Yeah. If you could ask a person, either dead or alive, one question, what would that question be and who would that person be?
That's a good question. There's just so many good options to choose from. I feel like it's hard to pick just one.
I always say that first one that you just thought of that came to mind is the best one.
I think I would ask Anna Wintour how she fits so much into every single day.
Okay, that's a fair ask. And why her specifically?
I mean, she's retiring, right? So we know that she's leaving Vogue and that's kind of inevitable. But she's had this hugely long career. And I think to get through that, to have the stamina, to have that important of a career and that long of a career is like such a major accomplishment that, we can all only hope to dream to have, right? In our own worlds and our own jobs and our own businesses. I think she's so laser focused and so efficient that I would love to absorb as much of that as I possibly can and take it into my own life and live my own life. Like, what would Anna Wintour do? She wouldn't be sleeping until 7:30. I can guarantee you that, like I do, right? So,
well, you never know. I mean, that's that British mentality, right? You never know. They're up pretty early over there, but I know what she's been doing. I mean, in Vogue since like the 80s, right, or something like that. Yeah. So she's been around for quite a long period of time. So you're right. That would be a good person. I like that is the first time anyone's ever brought her up before. So thank you for giving me a new one. Yeah. You get interesting people respond with interesting things. You never know what you're going to get. It's like a box of chocolates, but it's a good response. I love it. So awesome. Alexa, how can everyone find you? Is there an Instagram handle? Is there an email, a website they can go to? What's the best way people can find and talk to the Untrendy marketing team?
Yeah, so on Instagram, we are at Untrendy Marketing. Our website is the same, untrendymarketing.com. And if you want to reach out and talk to me directly, the best place to do that is via email at timeless@untrendymarketing.com.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time today to talk to me. I've learned a lot about marketing today, and I hope the viewers have as well, and a little bit more about you and the business. And I hope for many wonderful awards and more opportunities for you and the team. I'm excited to see how much you've grown in the business and to see what the next year brings for you. I'm really excited for you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.
Thank you.